Good evening, Mr. Hunt fans. If you've followed this channel for some time, you'll know that I've been on something of a journey regarding the Mission Impossible films. And I feel like this is very much reflected in my ranking of the films. If you'd have asked me prior to Dead Reckoning Part 1 to rank the 6 films in the series from favourite to least favourite, I would have said, well, 6, 5, 4, 3, 1, then a bit of a gap. 2. Dead Reckoning Part 1 is the first Mission Impossible film that I've gone to see at the cinema during its initial release since Ghost Protocol. I feel like, as much as I like that film, Rogue Nation, and especially Fallout, really took my appreciation and, dare I say, even love of this series to the next level. Fallout in particular, I feel like I saw it very recently for the first time, and it's one of those films that just the more I think about it, the more I kind of love it. I think that that film is really quite special and, elevated above much of the rest of the series. I just adored that film so much. And it had me really excited for Dead Reckoning Part 1. It's Tom Cruise back once again, of course, but along with Christopher McQuarrie, who I think has directed the 2 best films in the series, so very excited to see what they were going to pull out of the bag this time. And yeah, in many ways, Dead Reckoning Part 1 is very much in line with Fallout and Rogue Nation. I think they very much feel of the same piece. I think that Christopher McQuarrie does a really good job in making these films feel individual, but obviously it's the same director coming back 3 times now. He will be coming back for the next one as well, for the for his 4th Mission Impossible film, and I really like and appreciate that he manages to he has his own house style at this point, and yet the films still have their own individuality, which is really cool, and I appreciate it very much. And yeah, just to talk about some general thoughts before I get into some specifics, I had an absolute blast with Dead Reckoning Part 1. It's a really good, old-fashioned, dare I say, action, adventure, spy thriller. It is the longest film in the Mission Impossible series at this point. It is, 163 minutes, and I didn't quite realize that until I was going into the cinema, because I was sort of looking at my phone like, okay, well, what time am I gonna be back home tonight? Do I think, over 2.5 hours? Really? This film does not feel that length at all. I thought it zipped along, and I did check my watch a couple of times just to see like how far into it I was, and the first time I did it I was like pretty much smack bang halfway through. I couldn't believe how quickly this film went. Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt at this point is just such a delight to watch. As I said, my journey has been very much very public on this channel. If you've seen my previous Mission Impossible reviews, I started in Mission Impossible 1 and 2 really not caring for the guy that much. I feel like a bit too cocky, a bit too egotistical, but I feel like from Ghost Protocol onwards he's had a really good grasp of this character and a real consistency of performance. And obviously it's hard not to just find it totally intoxicating, his whole persona outside of the films. I saw someone on Twitter refer to him as the president of movies, and I think that that's just very apt. I love how much this guy is so excited about movies, the theatrical experience, him and the Christopher McQuarrie, the director, like having pictures with their tickets for Oppenheimer and Barbie coming up. I think it's really cool that he does so much to really promote the theatrical experience. I also saw someone else say that, Tom Cruise will entertain you or die trying, and indeed, that is, I feel like the Mission Impossible films at this point, they just know what they are, and they're gonna entertain you. They are going to give you intricate plots. There's gonna be a caper every 20 minutes or so, a good extended bit of action that'll be full of wit and invention and charm and just absolute badassness, and Tom Cruise does brilliantly through all that. He's like a 60-year-old man at this point, and he just looks phenomenal, running, and I have no doubt that he's at some kind of physical fitness peak, and certainly regarding the amount of stunts that he does, it's amazing that you believe him. You have to believe him because it's him actually doing it. In terms of the plot for this one, it's quite interesting, and this isn't a spoiler because it's very much there in the first couple of scenes, but the main villain is AI. Basically, which is such a real, particularly because this film has been delayed so much. We Bond fans thought we had it bad with No Time to Die, while Mission Impossible fans have quite possibly had it even worse with the amount of times this has been delayed. And yet it feels so to the minute regarding having AI as the villain, because I feel like that has really been in the news in a big way, maybe the past few months. It feels very current. And to say that this film was written a good few years ago, I think it shows remarkable foresight into where technology was heading, and it's also just quite cool. I don't know if there's ever... Philip Seymour Hoffman's great when I think back. I thought the villains in Fallout were really good. Sean Harris has been excellent in the previous two films, but otherwise, Mission Impossible villains don't have the same character, I suppose, what you would traditionally associate with a Bond villain character, for instance. And it's interesting because I don't know if the AI has a personality as such in this film, and yet I did think it was a really effective villain. There are some scenes where it's very much present, and I thought it was really creepy and effective. Obviously, this is a part one. They are going to be continuing this story, so some aspects of that plot are left dangling, obviously, for the next film. But in terms of this, in terms of an introduction to this villain, I thought it was really effective. It obviously has some human feet on the ground, so to speak, and I like that there is so much made of the greyness of some of the heads of the various security agencies, CIA, and all that kind of stuff. I think it really does well to portray a very politically grey world, and I think it very much makes it clear in the opening few scenes. They actually call out at a few points, like, this Ethan Hunt guy, he just goes rogue every time we give him a mission. Like, why do we keep using him for this? So much of the film is kind of like, well, we can actually trust him to do the right thing, whereas we can't these, various government agencies, even if on paper they are technically the good guys. Any problems that I have with the plot are kind of to do with the fact that it is a part one. It is a half of a story, and the film the film works, it builds, that you have an act 1, act 2, act 3, but it does just kind of stop at the end. Maybe it's to the credit of the film when I say that I just kind of wanted it to keep going even after 2.5 hours long. But there is, of course, some inherent disappointment with only experiencing half a story, and you're immediately kind of like, oh, I want to know what comes next. And the film very much follows the same formula as the previous films in the series. It's comprised of, 3 or 4 really intricate, really cool set pieces where Ethan and his team they've got a mission, they need to find the MacGuffin, they need to find the plot device that's going to take them to the next scene, and it's all about how are they gonna pull that off. In between that, obviously, you have various talking scenes of exposition and whatnot, and there were some places where I felt like, oh yeah, you could, because this was obviously a film that had its production shut down due to COVID. I think it started filming in early 2020 and they had to shut down and then restart, and there were some scenes that felt a little bit more confined, and the characters were sort of much further apart than I think that they would have been had they not been filming, like, really in the height of the pandemic, pretty much. That being said, I felt that all of the returning characters had just as much charm and personality that I've come to really enjoy. Ving Rhames and Simon Pegg are obviously back as 2 core members of the team, along with Tom Cruise, and I just love seeing those guys. Ving Rhames in particular is just such a joy at this point. I really enjoy them as a trio, and as a 4th member of that group, Rebecca Ferguson is back as Ilsa Faust. So it does feel a little bit odd that they're very much introducing a new, female lead in this one, Hayley Atwell as Grace, who is a professional thief, and I do wonder if her name being Grace is a callback to Catch a Thief, the Alfred Hitchcock film with Grace Kelly in that. I do wonder if that's a little nod. Knowing that Tom Cruise and Christopher McQuarrie are such movie buffs, I do wonder if that's a conscious, deliberate callback. I think I probably need to see more of that character to get a good gauge on them, and maybe it's because I loved Rebecca Ferguson so much in the previous couple of films. Like, seeing her back on screen, I was really excited. Hayley Atwell is obviously very new to this team and this group, and I think she's a really good actress. I've liked her in everything that I've seen her in, but the character just, I don't know, I still feel like I need to see a bit more of her before I have a good hold on her. Vanessa Kirby is back and has a lot more to do, I think, than what she had in Fallout, and again, I just love that character as well. Just one of those really morally grey, like, don't quite know where she's going to end up, and I do really like that about this series. As much as there are heroes and there are villains, very clear cut, a lot of characters exist in that middle space, and it really does bring an extra level of tension to a lot of scenes, because I'm trying to work out, I think, what is that character going to do in this situation? And it's very exciting. One of the real standouts for me in terms of new actors to the fold, Pom Klementieff. I'm probably mangling her surname awfully there. She is here as Paris. She's an assassin working for the villains, and she was a blast in this film. I got real, like, Xenia on her top from GoldenEye vibes at a couple of places, because she's so, like, she's, like, giddy and, like, smiling, like, ferociously as she's pursuing Ethan in a few places. Well, one of those really fun villainous characters who clearly just has such a just delights in their own villainy, just real high energy, but I thought she was really good. Which I think picked up a bit of slack for me regarding Esai Morales. Again, I'm probably really mangling that name, I'm sorry, but he is here as Gabriel, who is as close as I think we get to a main human villain in this. He's working for the AI system, and there's a history with Ethan. On paper, I think he works quite well. I don't know. I think he'll have a bit more to do in the next part. In this one, I felt that he was just a little bit too muted. And he's stuck between, this really crazy, like, henchwoman character who's so much fun, this AI entity, which is so powerful and all-seeing and really intriguing. I felt that he was just a little diluted, caught in the middle as a result. He's effectively there, I suppose, so that Ethan has, someone physical to have fights with. So, I appreciate him being there, but, comparing him to Henry Cavill, for instance, in the previous film, where I think I think Henry Cavill's role in Fallout was just one of those masterstroke casting decisions that took that film to another level, and I just don't feel like, this new guy is really in that same space. The action is, of course, phenomenal. There is that stunt that's been in all of the promotional material on the poster, Tom Cruise on the motorbike going over the thing, just absolutely fantastic. But obviously there's an awful lot of running in this one. He's doing an awful lot of his, karate chopping the air running, which is all good. I will say that I didn't feel like this film had any more action set pieces than previous ones, but because the running time is longer, there are more dialogue scenes, I think, and there are more characters in play, so some of the action stuff feels a little diluted as a result. And again, I'm sorry to keep going back to Fallout, but that whole climax in Fallout with the helicopters and everything, that was just insane. That was one of the best action movie climaxes I've ever seen. And again, I think having seen that so recently coming into this, it wasn't quite at that same level for me. Okay, from this point onwards, I'm gonna get into some spoilery territory. So if you haven't seen the film yet, I would recommend going and watching the film and then coming back and finishing this video, because I'm gonna do my wrap up later, but I did have an absolute blast watching this film. I would highly recommend it. If you've enjoyed a previous Mission Impossible film, you will enjoy this, I'm fairly certain, so go see it. So just to piggyback on the comments about the action, the fact that the climax is all set on this train, first of all, I really love that setting. I think trains are such a wonderful spy movie setting where characters can't really get on or off. Well, I mean, Ethan proves that point wrong in this film, but mostly they're confined. And the whole thing with it going over the edge is really exciting, and I did love the whole, how the carriages are just constantly, going over the edge of this broken bridge. That being said, that felt like a sequence that just the stakes weren't quite there, I don't think. Obviously for Ethan and Hayley Atwell, obviously their lives are, in danger in those moments, and it was really cool seeing all the stuff when they fly up in the air and all the stuff falling down. The grand piano bit was just fantastic, but it felt like, this is the thing, again, I suppose all my problems with the film are just kind of relating back to the fact that it is a part one, because that sequence to me felt like that belonged in the middle of the film, in the middle of the story, and the end of this film is the middle of this story, I suppose. So maybe watching this back to back in a 5 or 6 hour double bill with Dead Reckoning Part 2, it'll feel really perfectly positioned just before an intermission. But overall, I just felt like as a climax, it was just, like I say, that Fallout climax was so good, and they obviously need to hold something back for part 2, but I couldn't help just feel just that ever so slight bit of disappointment. And I was also somewhat disappointed that this is presumably the last film in which Rebecca Ferguson is going to be seen as Ilsa Faust, because she is killed about halfway, 2/3 of the way through the thing, and it's really telegraphed because they're going back into Ethan's past and, former Flame who was killed on a previous mission, and, there's at one point, there's sort of like, well, we're either going to kill Hayley Atwell or we're going to kill Ilsa Faust, and you need to pick Tom Cruise. And in that moment, it was kind of like, well, okay, Rebecca Ferguson's back for her 3rd film, and Hayley Atwell's been very much doing the promotional rounds for this and seems to be the new character that they're wanting to showcase, so I don't feel like this is going to go well for Ilsa. I think that she has a really cool fight with Gabriel, the villain character. There's that whole sequence through Venice, which is really awesome. She loses the fight, and I don't think I feel like they did the character a good service, because it's kind of like she loses like just gradually. It's just like he just gets one hit in, one stab in too many, which eventually brings her down. So I don't feel like the character was done a disservice. I think if you were going to take that character out, then this is how you do it. But I've said, and I said it in my Fallout review as well, I just love her, Tom Cruise, Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames together as a team is just my favourite ensemble that I've seen in these films. And I suppose I'm just kind of sad that that won't be continuing. On the other hand, I know that this is Rebecca Ferguson's 3rd film in this series, and you don't want things to become repetitive. You want to introduce new blood, keep things fresh. But I don't know if I took to Hayley Atwell's character the same way that I did Rebecca Ferguson's, so I was somewhat disappointed that she presumably won't be coming back for another installment. And I think I maybe also got just ever so slightly, again, like I'm talking about quibbles here, because I did really enjoy the film, but the fact that so much of the film is about finding these keys. In previous ones, I feel like there's always a MacGuffin, but they're looking for other things to get them to the MacGuffin, if you know what I mean. It feels sort of like, okay, we need this piece, and then we can, this is going to allow us to go and find the thing that we actually want. And here it is about, I feel like every set piece is about getting these keys, which are very important for the plot, obviously, but I don't know if it, escalated in quite the same way as previous films. But again, this is 50% of a story, so I'm assuming that in the next film we will see more. We will obviously see where these keys lead them. I'm guessing Ethan's going to be going on that Russian submarine that we see that gets sunk at the start of the film. So, again, maybe I'll come back, maybe when I do my review of Dead Reckoning Part 2, I'll be like, oh, those quibbles I had with Dead Reckoning Part 1 doesn't matter anymore. But, as I say, overall, I just had such a wonderful time at the cinema with this film. It is everything you want from an action spy thriller like this. It has great moments of humor, there's so much character to it, there's so, jaw-dropping moments of brilliance, fantastic stunt work, brilliant camera, like the vehicle stuff. Like, I loved the whole sequence where Tom Cruise and Hayley Atwell are handcuffed together and they go around in that little Fiat. It's so much fun. And again, it felt like a meshing of a couple of Bond scenes, obviously, when he gets handcuffed to Wei Lin in Tomorrow Never Dies, and then when he's driving the Citroen in For Your Eyes Only. So yeah, for Bond fans, you're definitely going to go through it and be like, wait a minute, that looks familiar, that looks familiar, that looks familiar. But again, I'm totally fine with Cruise and McQuarrie lifting from Bond films and, repurposing ideas and redoing action sequences in such brilliant ways. It's just, yeah, it's so much fun watching Dead Reckoning Part 1. So if I were to do my rankings now that Dead Reckoning is out, it has kind of spoiled my trajectory of liking each successive installment more than the other since Part 3. Because 6 is still my favourite. Then second I would put Rogue Nation. it's really tough for me whether it's Dead Reckoning Part 1 that comes next or Ghost Protocol. I'm inclined to go with Ghost Protocol and then Dead Reckoning Part 1 just because, again, it's just not a complete story, and that it is always slightly frustrating, or I find it always slightly frustrating, when a film isn't telling, you know, a complete story in and of itself. And then 3, 1, 2, but now I'm kind of feeling like I need to go back and rewatch those first 3. I haven't seen them in a good long while, and I keep seeing people posting on Twitter about, like, oh, Mission Impossible 1 is actually the best, and all that kind of stuff, and I'm like, maybe I should go back, and now that I've got over my Tom Cruise phobia, I clearly need to go back and maybe reevaluate some of those. We'll see. I'm definitely going to do a full rewatch of the series leading up to the Dead Reckoning Part 2 when that comes out next year, so yeah, that'll be my excuse to revisit those first 3 films. So yes, if you have seen a Mission Impossible film previously and you have enjoyed it, I would imagine that you would very much enjoy this. It is very much just it's reassuring that you have the the brand dependability of Tom Cruise Mission Impossible films, that you kind of know you're going to go to the film and just be entertained and have a really fun time at the cinema, and Dead Reckoning Part 1 does not disappoint in those regards. But do you have an opinion to the contrary? Please do let me know in the comments section below. And also below you can find links to my various social media pages, as well as the subscribe button and the Mrs. Bell notification button if you would like to stay up to date on future video uploads that I make on this channel. And with all that being said, and until next time, Mr. Hunt fans, so long for now.